Hello, you're watching Talking Europe. I'm at the Danish Foreign Ministry in Copenhagen with a guest who's been particularly busy during the Danish presidency of the European Union, which is now in its 5th month. With a few weeks to go before the last EU summit of the year and before the end of this presidency, it's an opportune time to talk to Bjerre, Denmark's Minister for European Affairs. She's held this position since August 2024. Previously, she was Minister for Digitalization and Minister for Gender Equality. And she's a member of Venstre, a liberal political party, which is part of the governing coalition here, led by Social Democratic Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. Bjerre, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much.
So Danes used to be known as quite Eurosceptic. You know, they voted against the Maastricht Treaty, against
and
the
we had our opt-outs.
Yeah. That's right, opt-outs from defence, but you've now opted back into defence cooperation.
We did.
So this is all a change in mood towards European integration then?
Absolutely, and I'm very happy that you're starting there because you don't have to talk to many Danes for a very long time to see that there has been a change of mindset, that the attitude towards EU has really changed quite dramatically, because we used to be a little bit more critic over EU with further integration, more EU legislation. But today, the major challenges that we are faced with, whether it's immigration or climate or competitiveness or security and defense or support for Ukraine, we do realize, and there's huge public support for that we need to solve those issues together in Europe.
Now, you're raising your defence spending to 3% of GDP. Does Denmark feel particularly vulnerable because of its geopolitical position and because, of course, of these drone incursions that were attributed to Russia that you experienced recently?
This has absolutely something to do with the new geopolitical reality that we are faced with, that we see war on our continent, war in Ukraine, a continuously more aggressive Russia, and also new political winds blowing from the US. And in such a situation, Europe have to be much stronger. Europe have to be able to defend itself. And therefore, Denmark also have to contribute to that.
I want to ask you a bit about enlargement and Ukraine. Obviously, you're strongly supporting Ukraine militarily and also its accession to the European Union eventually. Do you think there's any way of making progress on Ukraine's EU accession when you have this de facto blockage from the Hungarian Prime Minister, Mr. Orban?
There's absolutely possibility of making progress, and we are actually progressing. Yes, Hungary is blocking formally. We can't open the negotiation clusters formally, but we're working on the technical level. And we have, during our presidency, managed to front-load the technical work, meaning that when Hungary is not blocking anymore, then we will be capable of opening the negotiation clusters and hopefully also quite fast afterwards be able to close them, because the Ukrainians are working on the reforms.
So on Ukraine, you've got specific initiatives that you're working on, like Rome, like at home. Tell me about these various these projects.
Yes, because there are many ways of supporting Ukraine. One thing is enlargement and moving forward with the negotiation procedure, but other ways are also to make agreements that are getting Ukraine closer to the European Union. For instance, the agreement we made on Rome like at home. A lot of us remember how expensive it was when we used our phone going to France from Denmark. Right. But today it's cheap. And from 1st of January, it will be cheap for the Ukrainians as well. It sounds like a small agreement, but it's a big agreement for the Ukrainians, because it all goes to the fact that the Ukrainians are getting closer to EU, that we're getting a stronger collaboration and partnership.
I notice you have a wind turbine in your office.
True.
Denmark is obviously a pioneer of the green transition in Europe, and it's seen as a world leader on wind energy and things like that. There's been an agreement on an EU climate target, which was obviously agreed just before the COP started in Brazil. Critics said, though, that this target, a 90% cut in carbon emissions by 2040, is actually being undermined by various flexibilities on carbon credits. Do you think the goal was in fact undermined as a very kind of green conscious country?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that we succeeded even having a goal, even agreeing on a goal, and that was very, very difficult. My minister colleagues were negotiating through the nights. It was very difficult to reach that agreement. And yes, the agreement is not exactly like we would have liked it to be in Denmark. But we have an agreement, and now we can take a leadership, EU can take a leadership. We are still ambitious on the climate agenda, and that will drive developing new green technologies, which we're going to live up in the future.
Do you know if the Danish presidency, did they sort of push back then on this idea of the carbon credits, which could undermine this goal?
From a purely Danish perspective, we would have liked this agreement to look a little bit different. We are very ambitious on the climate agenda. We're not hiding that. Also because we believe that it is linked with competitiveness. In the future, we are not going to use fossil fuel. And the countries, the regions in the world that can develop those new green technologies that we are all going to live off, they will stand very good. So therefore, we have to drive the way as well.
Let's talk about simplification, which is obviously a big issue for the EU presidency that you're now holding. And actually there's a crucial vote coming up in the European Parliament on the so-called omnibus. Is there a risk, do you think, that corporate sustainability and corporate due diligence are going to be compromised by this simplification?
I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the European Parliament will reach agreement on the simplification agenda on sustainability. Right now, it's impossible for me as a politician to visit a Danish company without them saying that they are burdened with too many rules. Things are being too bureaucratic. We are asking them about too many reporting requirements, and that is something we have to look at. And Mario Draghi, the report from last year, said it quite clearly. We are over-regulating in EU. It's too burdensome to do business in EU, and therefore simplification is a key priority for our presidency. And luckily we already closed 2 agreements on this simplification, but the agreement on the sustainability is of course key for us also to close.
And as a very kind of tech-based society in many ways, I guess simplification is very important for Danish companies actually.
I think not only for Danish companies, it's important for all European countries, all European companies. And I think we also have to change about the green transition in a different way. We're not necessarily getting more green transition when reporting about it. It's also about innovation and letting the companies thrive and innovate.
Just a quick word about the EU budget, because these talks are proving to be very fraught, and your Prime Minister, Mrs. Frederiksen, was just discussing that with the EU Commission President a few days ago. Are these the most difficult EU budget talks ever?
It is difficult. Denmark has changed our attitude too when it comes to the budget. Normally we have been part of the frugal four.
The frugal four.
Frugal fourth. Not wanting a higher budget, no common debt. That is still not our policy to have a higher budget. But we also realize that Europe are threatened with many things, lack of competitiveness, that we cannot defend ourselves, security, many things. And we are going into these discussions with an open set of mind.
I want to ask you also about migration. Obviously, it's been a key theme of the Danish EU presidency. You wanted to deal with irregular migration and, of course, enhance security at the EU's external borders. The idea of return hubs for migrants outside the EU has run into legal difficulties recently. Is this, though, still an idea that the Danish presidency is interested in?
It is indeed still an idea. Denmark had a strict immigration policy for more than 25 years, and we are proud of that. For many years, I think we were not looked upon as a country for inspiration when it came to our immigration policy, but we are that today. Many countries realize that we need to have better control of migration and better control of sending irregular migrants back. And a part of that is building receiving center or returning hubs. We realize that's difficult to make as one single country, and that's why we're advocating that these hubs should be made together in EU. And we are now many countries that are working on this together, and I'm quite convinced that we will succeed because we are many countries advocating for that now.
Is it a paradox that a social democratic prime minister in Denmark, Mette Frederiksen, is an ally on the migration question of hard-right leaders like Viktor Orban or Giorgia Meloni, for example? Because I think that seems quite strange to people in other parts of Europe. What do you think of all that?
Well, I think it's hard for me to comment on because I'm not a social democrat myself. I'm a liberal right-wing politician. And for us, it's quite natural to have a strict immigration policy. But we also see that the politics, national politics in Denmark has changed, that having a strict immigration policy is common politics. It's also center politics. And that's why the Social Democrats, they also want a strict policy when it comes to migration.
Perhaps Denmark's kind of liberal image has changed in Europe over time because there are, for example, these housing laws targeting what's known as parallel societies. So one of the criteria of that is a certain percentage of residents from non-Western backgrounds. How does that sit with you as a Member of Parliament for a Liberal party? Is this in line with the kind of values of your party, let's say?
Absolutely. What we see, we are faced with many challenges due to immigration from countries with a totally different culture than the Danish society, with not the same values, not the same liberal values, freedom. I used to be a minister of gender equality. We see it in immigration societies where women cannot even choose their own partner, cannot even control their own financial situation. That is not a liberal society. It is really, really hard to integrate people that are from totally different cultures and backgrounds than the Danish background. And we have to insist, if you want to live in Denmark, you have to abide by our values, freedom and democracy.
A very clear message there. Thank you so much, Marie Bjerre, Minister for European Affairs. And we were talking earlier with my guest about enlargement, and we're going to have more on that in part 2 of Talking Europe with our guest, Jakov Milatovic, the President of Montenegro.